The stagecoach rattled to a halt before Marysville's only hotel, kicking up a cloud of California dust that shimmered gold in the late afternoon sun of 1858. Lucinda Keller gripped her small carpetbag with trembling fingers, heart pounding against her corset as she peered through the dusty window at what would be her new home at least, until she met the stranger who would become her husband. "End of the line, madam," the driver called, swinging the door open. "Welcome to Marysville." Lucinda stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, smoothing her travel-wrinkled dress. The journey from Boston had been grueling, 6 weeks of constant travel that left her exhausted and disheveled. Her once beautiful honey-blonde hair hung limp beneath her bonnet, and an incessant itch had plagued her scalp for the past week. The Feather River Inn stood 3 stories tall, the grandest building on the dusty Main Street. Lucinda had expected a primitive frontier settlement, but Marysville had grown rapidly since the gold rush began, boasting brick buildings, wooden sidewalks, and even a theater. Still, it was nothing like the refined Boston society she'd left behind. Miss Keller. A balding man in a dark suit approached, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I'm Harold Wilson, the town clerk. We received your letter about arriving today. Mr. Peterson sends his regrets that he couldn't meet you personally, but the spring cattle drive keeps him occupied at the ranch." Lucinda nodded stiffly. James Peterson, her future husband, had been corresponding with her for 8 months before proposing marriage. As a respected 32-year-old rancher with substantial holdings outside Marysville, he represented security for a 26-year-old woman whose family had lost everything in financial ruin. "The wedding is still set for Saturday," Mr. Wilson continued, escorting her toward the hotel entrance. "That gives you 3 days to rest from your journey. Mrs. Wilson has arranged for the dressmaker to visit tomorrow morning for final fittings." "Thank you," Lucinda murmured, trying to ignore the maddening itch creeping across her scalp. She'd been scratching surreptitiously for days, horrified at the thought that she might have contracted something during her travels. The stage coaches had been crowded, the accommodations along the way questionable at best. The hotel lobby was surprisingly elegant, with polished wooden floors and a grand staircase. Mr. Wilson spoke briefly with the clerk, who handed Lucinda a brass key. "Room 214, Miss Keller. A bath has been prepared as requested in your telegram." Lucinda nearly wept with gratitude. "Thank you. I'd like to rest now, if you don't mind." Once alone in her room, Lucinda removed her bonnet and collapsed onto the edge of the bed. The looking glass above the dresser revealed a stranger pale, with dark circles beneath her eyes, her blonde hair dull and tangled. She raised a hand to her scalp and scratched furiously, no longer concerned with propriety. A gentle knock at the door startled her. A young maid entered, followed by 2 porters carrying a large copper bathtub. "Your bath, miss," the girl said, bobbing a curtsy. "I'll fetch the hot water right away." When the tub was filled and the servants departed, Lucinda stripped off her travel-stained clothes and sank into the steaming water with a sigh of relief. She dunked her head beneath the surface, then reached for the small cake of lavender soap she'd packed in her carpetbag. As she lathered her hair, Lucinda's fingers caught on something. Frowning, she examined a strand of hair and froze in horror. Tiny grayish specks clung to the strands, and as she looked closer, she could see what appeared to be small eggs. Lice. Tears sprang to her eyes, hot with humiliation. She was to be married in 3 days to a man she'd never met, and she'd arrived in his town with vermin in her hair. How could she possibly face anyone now? Lucinda scrubbed frantically at her scalp, hoping the soap might rid her of the infestation, but she knew from childhood experience that ordinary soap wouldn't suffice. She needed proper treatment vinegar, perhaps, or kerosene. The thought of asking the hotel staff for such items, of admitting her shameful condition, was unbearable. After her bath, Lucinda dressed in a clean nightgown and sat by the window, staring out at the dusty street below as twilight descended. Tomorrow she would have to face the dressmaker, who would surely notice her condition. Word would spread through town, reaching James Peterson before they'd even met. What kind of first impression would that make on her future husband? Sleep eluded her that night, partly from the constant itching and partly from anxiety. By morning her eyes were red from crying, her fingers raw from scratching. She couldn't bear the thought of meeting anyone, much less the dressmaker. When the expected knock came at her door, Lucinda called out weakly, "I'm feeling unwell. Please come back tomorrow." "Miss Keller," a woman's voice, firm but kind. "It's Mrs. Wilson. May I come in?" Reluctantly, Lucinda opened the door. Mrs. Wilson was a plump, motherly woman with shrewd eyes that immediately assessed Lucinda's disheveled state. "My dear, what's the matter?" The sympathetic tone broke Lucinda's resolve. "I've contracted something during my journey," she whispered, mortified. "My hair, it's infested." To Lucinda's surprise, Mrs. Wilson didn't recoil in disgust. Instead, she closed the door and approached Lucinda, gently turning her toward the light from the window. "Lice," she confirmed after a brief examination. "Common enough, especially during long journeys. Nothing to be ashamed of, though I understand your distress." She patted Lucinda's hand. "I'll send for remedies. We'll have this taken care of before your wedding day." Lucinda's relief was overwhelming. "Thank you. I was afraid that Mr. Peterson might reconsider his proposal, Mrs. Wilson laughed softly. "My dear, men have their faults, but they're not quite that fickle. Now, I'll postpone the dressmaker until tomorrow and return with supplies." True to her word, Mrs. Wilson returned an hour later with vinegar, fine-toothed combs, and clean towels. But her expression was apologetic. "I'm afraid I've been called away unexpectedly. My daughter in Sacramento is in labor with her first child. I must leave on the afternoon stage." She set the supplies on the dresser. "But I've arranged for someone to help you." "Who?" Lucinda asked, alarmed at the thought of a stranger witnessing her humiliation. "Mr. O'Malley," Mrs. Wilson replied, as if this explained everything. "A man," Lucinda gasped. Mrs. Wilson smiled reassuringly. "Owen O'Malley. He's our local ranching expert, works for your Mr. Peterson, in fact. But he has other talents. His mother was a healer, taught him all sorts of remedies. He's helped half the children in town with similar problems. Very discreet, very competent." Before Lucinda could protest further, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Wilson opened it to reveal a tall man with broad shoulders and a sun-bronzed face. He carried a leather satchel and wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, though they appeared freshly laundered for the occasion. "Miss Keller, this is Owen O'Malley," Mrs. Wilson said. "Owen, Miss Lucinda Keller, Mr. Peterson's fiancée." Owen O'Malley removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair with a touch of copper where the sun caught it. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, regarded Lucinda with a mixture of respect and professional assessment. "Madam," he said, his voice deep but gentle, "Mrs. Wilson explained your situation. I'd be happy to assist if you'll permit me." Lucinda felt herself blushing furiously. "I couldn't possibly, Miss Keller," Owen interrupted softly. "I understand your discomfort. But this is a medical matter, not unlike a doctor treating a patient. I promise to be professional and discreet." Mrs. Wilson squeezed Lucinda's hand. "He's right, my dear. And truly, there's no one better suited to help you." Faced with little choice and desperate for relief, Lucinda reluctantly agreed. Mrs. Wilson departed for Sacramento, Leaving Lucinda alone with the cowboy healer, Owen O'Malley moved with surprising grace for such a large man. He set his satchel on the dresser and began removing items. A bottle of amber liquid, several herbs tied in bundles, a bar of strong-smelling soap, and what looked like specialized combs. "This is a problem easily solved," he said matter-of-factly, keeping his tone conversational as if discussing nothing more intimate than the weather. "Though I understand your embarrassment, the stage routes are notorious for such troubles." "You must think me terribly unclean," Lucinda murmured, unable to meet his eyes. "Not at all, madam. These little pests aren't particular about cleanliness. I've seen them in the cleanest homes and the finest hair." He gestured to a chair he'd positioned near the washbasin. "If you'll sit here, we can begin. The sooner we start, the sooner you'll have relief." Lucinda perched stiffly on the chair, her back ramrod straight, hands clenched in her lap. Owen moved behind her, his presence somehow both intimidating and reassuring. "I'll need to unpin your hair," he said. At her nod, his fingers worked deftly, removing pins until her long blonde tresses fell loose down her back. "You have beautiful hair, Miss Keller. We'll have it healthy again in no time." His kindness brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. Owen, please. And I'll call you Miss Lucinda, if that's agreeable." For the next hour, Owen worked methodically, first applying a mixture of vinegar and herbal extracts to her scalp, then combing through each section of hair with careful precision. His touch was gentle but thorough, his movements clinical rather than intimate, which helped ease Lucinda's discomfort. "My mother was a healer back in Missouri," he explained as he worked. "Learned from her Irish grandmother who learned from hers. She treated everyone, from wealthy plantation owners to slaves. Said ailments don't care about social standing." "How did you come to California?" Lucinda asked, grateful for the distraction from her embarrassment. "Came west during the gold rush of '49 like most. Found out quick enough I wasn't meant for mining, but I knew horses and cattle, so I found work on ranches." He carefully worked the fine-toothed comb through a section of her hair. "Been with the Peterson spread for 5 years now. It's good land, good cattle. Your fiancé runs a tight operation." At the mention of James Peterson, Lucinda tensed slightly. "Have you known Mr. Peterson long?" "Since I came to Marysville," Owen replied. "He's a fair employer, respected in these parts." His tone was neutral, giving away nothing of his personal feelings about the man who would soon be Lucinda's husband. "I've only corresponded with him," she admitted. "We've never actually met." Owen's hands paused momentarily before continuing their work. "That takes courage, Miss Lucinda. Coming all this way to marry someone you know only through letters." "Not courage," she said softly. "Necessity." He didn't pry further, and Lucinda was grateful. They fell into a companionable silence as he continued treating her hair, occasionally asking her to tilt her head in different directions. The herbal mixture tingled on her scalp, and already the maddening itch was subsiding. "I'll need to rinse this now," Owen said eventually. "If you could lean back over the basin." Lucinda complied, and he carefully poured warm water over her hair, his large hands shielding her face from the runoff. The sensation of his fingers massaging her scalp as he rinsed was unexpectedly pleasant, and she found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. "Now for the second treatment," Owen explained, reaching for the amber bottle. "This is a special oil my mother developed. Smells better than kerosene, works just as well." He applied the fragrant oil to her scalp, then wrapped her hair in clean towels. "This needs to sit for about an hour. I'll come back then for the final combing and rinse." "You're very kind to help me like this," Lucinda said, finally meeting his eyes directly. "It's no trouble." He smiled, and Lucinda noticed how it transformed his face, softening the weathered lines around his eyes. "I'll return at 4 o'clock if that suits you." After Owen left, Lucinda sat by the window, her head wrapped in towels, watching the bustling activity on Marysville's Main Street. Wagons loaded with mining supplies rumbled past, alongside elegant carriages and riders on horseback. A group of Chinese laborers worked on a building across the street, and well-dressed ladies shopped at the Mercantile. This would be her home now, so different from Boston with its cobblestone streets and brick townhouses. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. She'd left behind a life of genteel poverty, her father's debts had left her, and her mother nearly destitute for the promise of security with a successful rancher. James Peterson's letters had been kind, if somewhat formal. He described his ranch in detail, the house he'd built with an eye toward comfort, the thriving cattle business that allowed him certain luxuries despite the frontier setting. He sought a wife who was educated and well-bred, who could help him gain standing in the growing community. Lucinda had no illusions about romance. This was a practical arrangement that would benefit them both. Yet now, as her wedding day approached, doubts crept in. Would she truly be content as Mrs. James Peterson? Or was she merely exchanging one form of security for another? Owen O'Malley returned precisely at 4 o'clock, his punctuality surprising for a cowboy. He carried fresh towels and a small jar of what appeared to be cream. "How's the itching?" he asked, setting his supplies on the dresser. "Much better," Lucinda admitted. "Whatever you applied has worked wonders. Good. Now we'll do the final combing and rinse, then apply this." He indicated the jar. "It's a preventative, keeps the little pests from returning." Once again, Lucinda sat in the chair by the wash basin, letting Owen unwrap the towels from her hair. His movements were efficient but unhurried, his large hands surprisingly dexterous as he separated her hair into sections for combing. "Tell me about Boston," he said conversationally, as he worked the fine-toothed comb through her hair. "I've never been east of the Mississippi." Grateful for the distraction, Lucinda described her hometown, the historic buildings, the harbor with its forest of ship masts, the elegant homes of Beacon Hill, and the intellectual atmosphere fostered by Harvard University across the river in Cambridge. "It sounds like a different world," Owen remarked. "What made you leave it behind?" The question touched on matters too personal, too painful to share with a stranger. "Circumstances change," she said simply. "Sometimes one must seek opportunity elsewhere." Owen seemed to understand her reluctance. "California's good for fresh starts," he said, not pressing further. "Plenty of opportunity here for those willing to work hard. And you? Have you found what you were looking for?" His hand stilled momentarily. "I found something different than what I sought. Came looking for gold, found satisfaction in good, honest work instead." He resumed combing. "I'm saving to buy my own land someday. Small spread, nothing fancy but mine." There was something in his voice, determination, mingled with yearning, that resonated with Lucinda. This man understood ambition tempered by practicality. "I'm sure you'll succeed," she said sincerely. "Nearly done here," Owen announced after completing the thorough combing. "Now for the final rinse." He helped her lean back over the basin again, pouring clean water through her hair until it ran clear. Then he wrapped it in fresh towels, gently blotting the excess moisture. "One last step," he said, opening the jar of cream. "This needs to be worked into your scalp. It smells pleasant enough, rosemary and lavender, mostly." His fingers massaged the cream into her scalp with gentle pressure that Lucinda found surprisingly soothing. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to enjoy the sensation without dwelling on the impropriety of the situation. "There," Owen said finally, stepping back. "All done. Your hair is clean now, but I'd recommend another treatment in 3 days just to be certain." Lucinda touched her damp hair, feeling no trace of the irritating itch that had plagued her for days. "How can I thank you?" "No thanks necessary," he said, packing away his supplies. "Though perhaps you could satisfy my curiosity about one thing." "What's that?" "What sort of letters does a man write to convince a Boston lady to travel across the country to marry him?" There was a hint of something in his voice, not quite mockery, but a gentle skepticism. Lucinda felt heat rising to her cheeks. Mr. Peterson's letters were informative. He described his ranch, his position in the community. He seeks a partnership of mutual benefit. Ah, practical. Owen nodded, his expression unreadable. "Well, he's certainly practical. The Peterson Ranch is one of the most efficient operations in the county." Something in his tone made Lucinda defensive. "Not everyone marries for romantic notions, Mr. O'Malley. There's much to be said for sensible arrangements." "Of course," he agreed, though his eyes held a flicker of something that might have been pity. "I should be going. I'll return in 3 days for the follow-up treatment, if that's acceptable." After Owen left, Lucinda stood before the mirror, combing her damp hair. It already looked healthier, the blonde strands beginning to shine again. 3 more days and she would be married to James Peterson, a man she'd never met but had committed to joining in matrimony. The thought should have filled her with anxiety, but instead, she found herself thinking of Owen O'Malley's gentle hands and kind eyes. The next morning, the dressmaker arrived with Lucinda's wedding gown for the final fitting. Mrs. Monroe was a chatty woman who seemed to know everything about everyone in Marysville. "Such a lovely dress for a spring wedding," she said, adjusting the lace at the bodice. Mr. Peterson spared no expense, having the fabric shipped from San Francisco. He's quite particular about appearances. "You know him well?" Lucinda asked, trying to sound casual. "Everyone knows James Peterson," Mrs. Monroe replied, pins held between her lips. "Came here with nothing in '49, built the largest cattle ranch in the county. Very methodical man. Keeps to himself mostly, except for business." She stepped back to assess the fit. "Turn, please." Lucinda turned slowly, the ivory silk rustling softly. "And his character, is he well liked?" Mrs. Monroe considered the question carefully. "Respected, certainly. Not one for socializing, but fair in his dealings." She adjusted the bustle. "This is his second marriage, you know." Lucinda stiffened. "No, I didn't know." "Oh," Mrs. Monroe looked momentarily flustered. "I assumed he would have mentioned it in his letters. His first wife died 3 years ago, influenza, no children." She resumed pinning the hem. "He mourned appropriately, then set about finding a suitable replacement in a very businesslike manner. That's his way." A suitable replacement. The phrase chilled Lucinda. James had never mentioned a previous marriage in his letters. What else might he have omitted? "There, Mrs. Monroe said, standing. "Perfect. I'll have the final stitching done by tomorrow afternoon. Such a beautiful bride you'll make." After the dressmaker left, Lucinda sat by the window, watching the activity on the street below. Her gaze caught on a familiar figure, Owen O'Malley, leading a magnificent chestnut horse down the main street. He stopped to speak with several townspeople, his manner easy and friendly. Even from a distance, she could see the respect with which others treated him. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Wilson returned from Sacramento, beaming with news of her healthy grandson. She invited Lucinda to dinner at her home, insisting she must be tired of hotel meals. The Wilson home was modest but comfortable, and dinner was a pleasant affair, with Mr. Wilson recounting humorous tales of Marysville's early days. As they enjoyed apple pie for dessert, Lucinda gathered her courage to ask about James Peterson's first marriage. Mrs. Wilson exchanged a glance with her husband. We wondered if he had mentioned that in his letters. He didn't, Lucinda admitted. Mr. Wilson cleared his throat. Elizabeth Peterson was a fine woman, quiet, efficient, much like James himself. They seemed well suited. What was she like? Lucinda pressed. Fair-haired like yourself, Mrs. Wilson replied carefully. Educated, from Sacramento originally. She ran the household with precision, entertained when necessary for business purposes. She hesitated. They had what appeared to be a harmonious arrangement. That word again, reinforcing the nature of what Lucinda was entering into. And Mr. O'Malley, Lucinda said, trying to sound casual. He works for Mr. Peterson. Owen. Yes, he's the foreman at the Peterson Ranch, Mr. Wilson replied. Best horseman in the county, excellent with cattle. James relies on him heavily, though they're very different men. Different how? Mrs. Wilson smiled slightly. Owen is warmer, more personable. He has a way with people as well as animals. James is more reserved, keeps his own counsel. She patted Lucinda's hand. But he's a good man, dear. Stable, reliable. You needn't worry. Lucinda wasn't worried, precisely. But she was beginning to wonder about the man she'd agreed to marry and about the man who had so kindly helped her in her moment of distress. When Lucinda returned to her hotel room, she found a small package waiting for her with a note from Owen O'Malley. Miss Lucinda, a tonic for your hair to restore shine after today's treatment. Apply before sleeping. I'll return as promised in 2 days. Respectfully, O. O'Malley. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. She opened the small bottle and inhaled the pleasant herbal scent before applying it to her hair as instructed. That night, Lucinda dreamed of her wedding day, but in the dream, when she lifted her veil, it wasn't James Peterson waiting at the altar but Owen O'Malley, his blue eyes warm with something more than kindness. She woke unsettled, chiding herself for such improper thoughts. She was committed to this marriage, had traveled thousands of miles for it. A few moments of kindness from a handsome cowboy were no reason to question her decision. The next day passed in a flurry of wedding preparations. Mrs. Wilson escorted Lucinda to various shops to acquire last-minute necessities, introduced her to prominent townspeople, and helped her compose a telegram to her mother in Boston, confirming her safe arrival and impending marriage. Will Mr. Peterson be at the rehearsal dinner tomorrow evening? Lucinda asked as they walked back to the hotel. Oh yes, he's coming into town tomorrow afternoon. The wedding rehearsal is at 5, followed by dinner at the hotel. Mrs. Wilson squeezed her arm reassuringly. Don't be nervous, dear. Everything will be fine. But as the day of the rehearsal dawned, Lucinda found her anxiety mounting. By afternoon, she was pacing her hotel room, alternately staring out the window and checking her appearance in the mirror. A knock at the door startled her. Opening it, she found Owen O'Malley, hat in hand, his blue eyes regarding her with concern. Miss Lucinda, I've come for the follow-up treatment as promised. She'd nearly forgotten their arrangement. Of course, please come in. Owen set his satchel on the dresser, noticing her agitation. Are you all right? You seem troubled. I'm meeting my fiancé today, she admitted. For the first time, understanding dawned in his eyes. Ah, understandably nerve-wracking. He began arranging his supplies. If you prefer to postpone our appointment, no, Lucinda said quickly. No, this is a welcome distraction, actually. And I'd like my hair to be at its best when I meet Mr. Peterson. Owen nodded, gesturing to the now familiar chair by the wash-basin. As he worked the treatment through her hair with deft fingers, Lucinda found herself relaxing despite her anxiety about the evening ahead. You've used the tonic I left? Owen asked. Yes, every night. It's wonderful my hair hasn't felt this healthy in months. Good. His voice held satisfaction. Your hair is looking much better. No signs of the little visitors remaining. They fell into comfortable conversation, with Owen telling amusing stories about local characters and the early days of Marysville during the gold rush. His deep voice and easy manner calmed Lucinda's nerves, and she found herself laughing genuinely for the first time since her arrival. As Owen rinsed the treatment from her hair, he said casually, "So you'll be meeting the boss today?" "Yes, at the rehearsal dinner this evening." His hands were gentle as they worked through her hair. "He's a fortunate man," Owen said quietly. "I hope he knows that." The sincerity in his voice made Lucinda's breath catch. Before she could respond, he stepped back. "All done," he announced, professional once more. "Your hair is completely clear now. No need for further treatments." "Thank you for everything," Lucinda said, rising from the chair. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." Owen packed his supplies, his movements efficient. "Will you be staying at the Peterson ranch after the wedding?" "Yes, I believe so. Mr. Peterson mentioned in his letters that the house is quite comfortable, despite being some distance from town." "It's a fine house," Owen agreed. "About an hour's ride from Marysville. Good water, solid construction." He hesitated. "I should tell you, my quarters are on the property as well the foreman's cabin near the main corral, but I'll make myself scarce, give you and the boss privacy as you settle in." The thought of Owen nearby brought Lucinda an unexpected sense of relief, which she immediately chastised herself for feeling. She was to be a married woman. It wasn't proper to take comfort in another man's proximity. "I'm sure we'll manage the transition smoothly," she said formally. Owen nodded, reaching for his hat. "I wish you happiness in your marriage, Miss Lucinda. Truly." His blue eyes held hers for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of a connection that had formed unexpectedly over the past days. Then he was gone, and Lucinda was left to prepare for her first meeting with James Peterson. The church was small but well-maintained, with polished wooden pews and modest stained glass windows. Lucinda arrived with Mrs. Wilson at precisely 5 o'clock, her heart thundering in her chest. A small group waited inside Mr. Wilson, the minister, and 2 men she didn't recognize. Mrs. Wilson led her forward, toward a tall, distinguished-looking gentleman with iron-gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an expensive black suit and stood with perfect posture, his expression attentive but reserved. "James," Mrs. Wilson said, "may I present Miss Lucinda Keller?" James Peterson bowed formally, taking Lucinda's gloved hand in a brief, correct handshake. "Miss Keller, welcome to Marysville. I trust your journey was not too arduous." His voice matched his letters precise, well modulated, revealing little emotion. Up close, Lucinda could see he was handsome in a stern way, his features regular and his gray eyes intelligent. He appeared to be in his early 40s, older than she had imagined but still vigorous. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." They regarded each other with mutual assessment. Lucinda saw approval in his gaze as he took in her appearance, the pale blue dress she'd chosen carefully, her hair arranged in a fashionable style that showed off its renewed luster. "You are even lovelier than your daguerreotype suggested," he said with formal gallantry. "I believe we will suit admirably." It was a practical statement, not a romantic one, and Lucinda found herself oddly relieved. This was exactly the sort of arrangement she had anticipated, respectful, proper, without the complications of excessive emotion. The minister cleared his throat and they proceeded with the rehearsal. James was attentive and correct, if somewhat distant. He performed each action as instructed with precision, his responses measured and appropriate. As they practiced the exchange of vows, Lucinda was struck by the solemnity of the moment. In less than 24 hours, she would pledge herself to this man for life, binding her future to his. The enormity of it settled over her like a heavy cloak. The rehearsal dinner at the hotel dining room was an elegant affair by frontier standards. The Wilsons had invited several prominent citizens to welcome Lucinda and celebrate the upcoming nuptials. James sat beside her, attentive but not overly familiar, introducing her to various townspeople with evident pride in her poise and education. "Miss Keller comes from one of Boston's respected families," he informed Judge Bailey's wife. "She will be a significant addition to Marysville society." Lucinda smiled and conversed appropriately, playing the role expected of her. Yet throughout the evening, she found her gaze drawn repeatedly to the dining room entrance, half expecting to see Owen O'Malley's tall figure. But he didn't appear. "Is your foreman joining us this evening?" she asked James during a lull in the conversation. "O'Malley? No, I've left him in charge at the ranch." James raised an eyebrow slightly. "How do you know of him?" Lucinda felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Mrs. Wilson mentioned him, and I believe I saw him in town yesterday." James nodded. "He's an excellent foreman, reliable, handles the men well." His tone was that of an employer describing a valued but subordinate employee, nothing more. "You'll see him about the property, of course, but he keeps to his duties." After dinner, James escorted Lucinda to the hotel lobby. "I'll send the carriage for you tomorrow at 10, he said. "The ceremony is at 11, as you know." "Yes, thank you." Lucinda hesitated. "Mr. Peterson, James, please. We are to be married tomorrow." "James, there's something I should perhaps mention." She took a deep breath. "When I arrived in Marysville, I discovered I had contracted a condition during my journey, head lice." She watched his face carefully. "Mrs. Wilson arranged for me to receive treatment. Your foreman, Mr. O'Malley, was kind enough to assist, as he apparently has some skill in such matters." James's expression remained neutral, though his eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, these things happen during travel. O'Malley's mother was some sort of healer, I believe. It's good that the matter was resolved discreetly." He paused. "I appreciate your honesty, Lucinda. I value forthright communication in all things." With that, he bowed over her hand and took his leave, promising to see her at the church the next day. Alone in her room, Lucinda stood by the window, staring out at the darkened street. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. James Peterson. It was what she had traveled across the country to do, what she had committed to in her letters. James seemed exactly as he had portrayed himself: honorable, established, respectable. There was no reason for the heaviness in her heart, the sense of something important slipping away. She touched her hair, remembering the gentle way Owen had tended to her, how his kindness had transformed a mortifying situation into something almost intimate. She thought of his blue eyes, the way they crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the strength in his hands as they worked through her hair. "Stop this," she whispered to herself. "You're being foolish." But as she prepared for bed, Lucinda couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads, and that her choice, already made through letters and promises, might be leading her away from rather than toward happiness. Morning dawned clear and beautiful, the California spring bringing a gentle warmth and blooming wildflowers that decorated the church entrance. Mrs. Wilson arrived early to help Lucinda dress, exclaiming over the beauty of the wedding gown with its delicate lace and pearl buttons. "You make a stunning bride," she declared as she secured the small wreath of orange blossoms that would hold Lucinda's veil in place. James will be speechless. Lucinda studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman who gazed back seemed like a stranger, composed, beautiful, ready to step into a new life. Her hair gleamed golden in the morning light, arranged in an elegant style that showcased its healthy shine. "There," Mrs. Wilson said, adjusting the veil. "Perfect." A knock at the door announced the arrival of the carriage. Mr. Wilson would escort Lucinda to the church and give her away, standing in for her absent father. The short journey to the church passed in a blur. Before Lucinda knew it, she was standing at the back of the church, the wedding march beginning as the small congregation rose to its feet. James waited at the altar, straight-backed and formal in his black suit. He watched her approach with evident approval, his gray eyes assessing rather than admiring. As Mr. Wilson placed her hand in James's, Lucinda felt the cool, dry firmness of his grip proper, correct, unyielding. The minister began the ceremony, his voice echoing in the small church. Lucinda responded automatically to the familiar words, her mind oddly detached from the proceedings. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional pause followed, a formality never expected to be filled. But in that silence, the church door opened with a soft creak. Lucinda turned, along with everyone else, to see Owen O'Malley standing in the doorway. His normally confident posture was tense, his expression troubled as his gaze met Lucinda's. For an eternal moment, they stared at each other across the church. In Owen's blue eyes, Lucinda saw everything he couldn't say: regret, yearning, a question he had no right to ask. The minister cleared his throat. "Is there an objection?" Owen's gaze shifted to James, then back to Lucinda. His hand tightened on his hat, knuckles white with tension. Then, with visible effort, he straightened his shoulders. "No objection, Reverend. I apologize for the interruption. There's an urgent matter at the ranch that requires Mr. Peterson's attention." He directed his words to James. "The North Pasture Dam is threatening to breach with the spring melt. The men are working on it, but I thought you should know before you leave for Sacramento." James frowned. "How serious is it? Could lose the lower fields if it gives way. Might be nothing, might be trouble." Owen's voice was steady, professional, though his eyes flickered briefly to Lucinda. James turned to the minister. "We need to proceed quickly then. Can we continue without delay?" The Reverend, flustered by the interruption, nodded and resumed the ceremony at an accelerated pace. Lucinda found herself responding automatically, her mind racing. As she spoke her vows, promising to love, honor, and obey James Peterson until death parted them, she was acutely aware of Owen's presence at the back of the church, a silent witness to her pledge. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed her briefly, a proper, passionless seal to their contract. The small congregation applauded politely as they turned to face them as Mr. and Mrs. James Peterson. As they proceeded down the aisle, Lucinda saw that Owen had already slipped out, leaving only the open door as evidence of his presence. The wedding breakfast was a subdued affair, overshadowed by concern about the potential crisis at the ranch. James spoke with several guests about the dam, technical conversations about water flow and construction that excluded Lucinda. "I'm afraid we'll need to forego our planned stay in Sacramento," James told her as they prepared to leave. "We should return to the ranch immediately so I can assess the situation." "Of course," Lucinda agreed, understanding the priorities of ranch life. "I'm ready whenever you are." They departed amid good wishes and congratulations, boarding James's comfortable carriage for the journey to what would now be her home. As they left Marysville behind, traveling through rolling hills dotted with oak trees and spring wildflowers, James outlined what would be expected of her as the mistress of Peterson Ranch. "The household runs efficiently," he explained. Mrs. Chavez is an excellent cook and housekeeper. She comes in daily from her family's place nearby. You'll have authority over domestic matters, of course, but I suggest observing the current arrangements before making changes. I understand, Lucinda said. I'm eager to learn the workings of the ranch. James looked pleased at her practicality. Good. There will be certain social obligations entertaining business associates, participating in town functions as appropriate. Your education and manners will be an asset. He paused. My first wife, Elizabeth, found the isolation difficult at times. I hope you will adapt more readily. It was the first time he had mentioned his previous marriage. I'm sorry for your loss, Lucinda said quietly. Mrs. Wilson mentioned that your wife passed 3 years ago. Yes, influenza, a difficult time. His tone was measured, revealing little emotion. Elizabeth was an excellent partner. Very organized, very proper. They lapsed into silence as the carriage continued through increasingly rugged terrain. After about an hour, they crested a hill and James pointed ahead. Peterson Ranch. Lucinda leaned forward, taking in her first view of her new home. The property spread across a broad valley, with a substantial 2-story house set among mature oak trees. Several outbuildings and corrals surrounded it, with cattle visible grazing on the hillsides beyond. A stream wound through the property, widening into a pond near the house. It's beautiful, she said sincerely. Practical, James corrected. Good water, natural shelter, defensible position. I chose the location carefully. As they approached, Lucinda saw several cowboys working around the corrals. One figure separated from the group and approached the carriage as it pulled up to the house. Owen O'Malley, his expression carefully neutral as he greeted them. Boss, Mrs. Peterson. He nodded to them both, his eyes meeting Lucinda's only briefly. The men have the dam stabilized for now. I can show you the repairs when you're ready. Good work, O'Malley. James helped Lucinda from the carriage. I'll see my wife settled, then join you to inspect the damage. Yes, sir. Owen tipped his hat and retreated, his tall figure striding toward the barn without looking back. James escorted Lucinda into the house, which proved to be as solid and practical as its owner. The furnishings were of good quality but chosen for durability rather than fashion. Large windows provided excellent light and views of the surrounding landscape. James showed her through the downstairs rooms, a formal parlor, dining room, his study, and a well-appointed kitchen where a plump Mexican woman was preparing dinner. Mrs. Chavez, this is my wife, James said. She will be mistress of the household now. The housekeeper bobbed a curtsy, her dark eyes assessing Lucinda curiously. Welcome, Senora. I hope you will be happy here. Thank you, Mrs. Chavez. I look forward to working with you. James then led Lucinda upstairs to the master bedroom, a large room with a 4-poster bed and sturdy walnut furniture. I had the room redecorated for your arrival, he said, indicating new curtains and bedding in a muted blue. I hope it meets with your approval. It's lovely, Lucinda said, touched by the consideration. Your trunks arrived yesterday. They're in the dressing room there. He gestured to an adjoining door. I'll leave you to settle in while I check on the dam situation. Dinner is at 6. After James left, Lucinda moved to the window, which overlooked the main yard and corrals. She could see James and Owen walking toward the north pasture, deep in conversation. Even from a distance, the differences between the two men were striking. James straight-backed and formal in his good suit. Owen loose-limbed and natural in his working clothes. She turned away from the window and began unpacking her trunks, arranging her belongings in the spacious dressing room. As she worked, she tried to focus on the positives of her new situation: the beautiful property, the comfortable house, the security of being Mrs. James Peterson. Yet as she placed her hairbrush on the dressing table, she couldn't help remembering Owen's gentle hands combing through her hair, his kind eyes, his easy laugh. She pushed the thought away firmly. Such reflections were inappropriate for a newly married woman. The days that followed established a pattern to life at Peterson Ranch. James rose early, breakfasted promptly at 6:30, and spent his days overseeing ranch operations. He was unfailingly polite to Lucinda, consulting her on household matters and providing a generous allowance for her personal needs. Their interactions were cordial but formal. James treated her with respect, but maintained a certain distance, even in private. Their marriage was consummated with the same efficient practicality that characterized his approach to everything else not unpleasant. But lacking the warmth or passion Lucinda had secretly hoped might develop between them. Lucinda busied herself learning the workings of the ranch household, establishing a comfortable relationship with Mrs. Chavez, and exploring the property on horseback when time permitted. James had presented her with a gentle mare named Daisy, suitable for a lady's riding. She saw Owen O'Malley regularly, but distantly. He reported to James daily, occasionally joined them for formal dinners when business required discussion, and nodded politely to Lucinda when their paths crossed. He maintained a scrupulous correctness that matched her own careful behavior. Yet sometimes she would look up to find his blue eyes watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. In those unguarded moments, before they both remembered their positions, something powerful and unspoken passed between them. Spring gave way to summer, and Lucinda settled into her role as Mrs. Peterson. She hosted dinner parties for James's business associates, made the appropriate appearances in Marysville, and earned approval for her efficient management of the household. If she sometimes felt lonely, if the practical partnership she shared with James left her yearning for something more, she kept such thoughts to herself. July brought scorching heat to the valley, turning the hills golden as the grasses dried under the relentless California sun. Fire danger became a constant concern, with James organizing the men into patrols to watch for the first sign of smoke. "It's our worst danger this time of year," he explained to Lucinda over breakfast one morning. "A single spark can destroy everything we've built." That afternoon, as Lucinda was reviewing household accounts in the parlor, she heard shouts from the yard. Looking out the window, she saw men running toward the barn, Owen O'Malley's voice rising above the commotion, issuing rapid commands. She hurried outside to find James mounting his horse, his expression grim. "Fire on the east ridge," he told her tersely. "I'm taking the men to fight it before it reaches the valley. Stay close to the house." Before she could respond, he rode off, joining the group of cowboys already heading toward a plume of smoke visible on the distant hillside. Among them, Owen's tall figure was instantly recognizable, directing men and equipment with calm authority. Hours passed with no word from the firefighting crew. Lucinda paced the porch, watching the smoke column grow despite the men's efforts. Mrs. Chavez brought her lemonade and tried to persuade her to come inside, away from the heat and anxiety of watching. "The men know what they do, Senora," she said reassuringly. "This happens every summer." But Lucinda couldn't relax, couldn't focus on anything but the distant smoke and the men, including her husband and Owen, fighting to save the ranch. As dusk approached, she spotted riders returning, moving slowly. Her heart clenched at the sight of one man slumped in his saddle, supported by another rider. As they drew closer, she recognized Owen, his face blackened with soot, holding an unconscious James. Lucinda ran to meet them, fear clutching at her throat. "What happened?" "Smoke inhalation and burns," Owen explained tersely, dismounting carefully while supporting James. He was trying to save a group of stranded cattle when the wind shifted. I got to him as fast as I could. Together, they carried James into the house and up to the master bedroom. His breathing was labored, his face ashen beneath the soot, and angry red burns marked his hands and forearms where his sleeves had caught fire. "We need the doctor," Lucinda said, already moving to send one of the ranch hands to Marysville. "Already sent, Miguel," Owen replied, his voice hoarse from smoke. "But it'll be hours before he can get here. We need to treat him now." For the next hour, Lucinda and Owen worked together to care for James. They bathed his burns with cool water, wrapped them in clean cloths soaked in a solution Owen prepared from herbs in his saddlebag, and elevated his head to ease his breathing. As they worked, the barriers between them dissolved in their shared concern for James. Owen's hands were gentle but sure as he demonstrated how to wrap the burns, his voice steady as he explained what to watch for. Lucinda followed his instructions without question, trusting his knowledge. "You've done this before," she observed as Owen mixed another herbal preparation. "Too many times," he admitted. "Fire's a constant threat out here." He looked at James, his expression somber. "He saved those men and cattle. Rode straight into the smoke when the wind shifted, led them out before going back for the stragglers. Never seen a man with more grit." The admiration in his voice was genuine, and Lucinda felt a surge of pride in her husband's courage. Whatever their marriage lacked in passion, James was a good, honorable man who took his responsibilities seriously. After stabilizing James as best they could, Owen straightened, wincing slightly. Only then did Lucinda notice the burn on his own forearm, partially hidden by his rolled-up sleeve. "You're injured too," she said, reaching for his arm. "It's nothing," he tried to dismiss it, but Lucinda was already examining the angry red mark. "This needs treatment," she insisted, leading him to a chair by the washstand. "Let me help you as you've helped me." Owen submitted, watching silently as she gently cleaned and dressed his burn using the same methods he had demonstrated. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, his muscles tense as she worked. "Thank you," she said softly, securing the bandage, "for saving my husband." Their eyes met, and for a moment, all the things they couldn't say hung in the air between them. Then Owen stood, breaking the connection. "I should check on the men," he said. "Some of them have minor burns and smoke issues too, of course." Lucinda stepped back, resuming her proper role. "Please let me know if anyone needs more intensive care." Owen paused at the door, looking back at James's unconscious form. "He'll recover," he said, with a certainty that comforted Lucinda. "He's too stubborn not to." Then he was gone, and Lucinda returned to her vigil at James's bedside. The doctor arrived near midnight, confirming Owen's assessment and treatments. James had suffered moderate burns and significant smoke inhalation, but with proper care, he would recover fully, though it would take time. For the next 2 weeks, Lucinda barely left James's side, nursing him through fever and pain with devoted attention. During this time, Owen took charge of the ranch operations, reporting daily to the sick room on business matters that required James's input. These brief interactions were strictly professional, with Owen standing just inside the door while James, propped up in bed, issued instructions in a voice weakened by his ordeal. Lucinda would remain by her husband's side, occasionally offering Owen tea or refreshment, their eyes meeting briefly before both looked away. As James began to recover, a subtle shift occurred in his relationship with Lucinda. Her dedicated care during his illness seemed to soften something in him. He became more inclined to share his thoughts, to ask her opinion on matters beyond the household, to reveal small personal details he had previously kept to himself. One evening, as Lucinda read to him from a book of poetry she'd brought from Boston, James watched her with an expression she'd never seen before, a kind of wondering appreciation. "You've surprised me, Lucinda," he said when she paused in her reading. "How so?" "I selected you as my wife based on practical considerations, your education, your background, your apparent good sense. I expected competence." He reached for her hand, his touch uncharacteristically gentle. "I didn't expect such compassion, such steadfastness." Lucinda felt a rush of warmth at his words. "Thank you, James. That means a great deal to me." "I'm not an expressive man," he continued, his gray eyes serious. "My first marriage was satisfactory. Elizabeth and I had a mutual understanding, a shared vision for building this ranch. But there was little warmth between us." He squeezed her hand. "Perhaps we might have something more, you and I." It was the closest James had ever come to expressing affection, and Lucinda was deeply moved. This was what she had hoped for, a chance for their arranged marriage to grow into something meaningful, something based on mutual respect and genuine caring. By early August, James had recovered enough to resume limited duties. The fire had destroyed some pasture land, but spared the main ranch buildings and most of the livestock. Thanks to the quick action of James, Owen, and the ranch hands, life began returning to normal, though with subtle changes. James made a point of spending more time with Lucinda, sharing meals without rushing back to work, occasionally riding out with her to show her the property. He remained reserved by nature, but there was a new gentleness in his manner, a deliberate effort to build a deeper connection. Lucinda responded to these overtures with genuine warmth, determined to nurture this new dimension of their relationship. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, appreciating James's intelligence and dry humor, respecting his unwavering sense of duty. And if sometimes, when riding across the ranch, she caught sight of Owen O'Malley working with the cattle or training horses, if her heart still quickened at the memory of his gentle hands and kind eyes, she pushed such thoughts firmly aside. She was committed to her marriage, to the vows she had made, to building a life with the man who had given her security and, increasingly, affection. Autumn brought cooler weather and the cattle roundup, a busy time when all hands were needed. Lucinda surprised James by offering to help with feeding the cowhands, setting up a temporary kitchen near the corrals where she and Mrs. Chavez served hearty meals to the men working from dawn to dusk. It was during this time that she found herself working alongside Owen more frequently, as he coordinated the roundup activities. Their interactions remained proper but unavoidably more personal in the informal setting of the camp kitchen. One evening, as Lucinda was cleaning up after the men had eaten, Owen approached with an empty coffee pot. The other hands had retired to their bedrolls, and James had returned to the main house earlier, still tiring easily from his summer injuries. "Thank you for doing this," Owen said, gesturing to the camp kitchen. "The men appreciate it. Makes a hard job easier, having good food and a friendly face." "I'm happy to help," Lucinda replied, taking the pot from him. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she quickly withdrew her hand. "It's given me a better understanding of the ranch operations." Owen leaned against the makeshift counter, his posture relaxed yet somehow still maintaining a respectful distance. "You've changed things around here," he observed. "For the better." "What do you mean?" "The boss is different since you came, especially since the fire." Owen's blue eyes were thoughtful in the lantern light. "He talks more, listens more. Even laughed at Hank's terrible joke yesterday, never seen that before." Lucinda smiled, pleased by the observation. "He's a good man." "Perhaps just reserved." "Yes." Owen studied her face for a moment. "You're good for him. I'm glad about that. The simple statement carried a weight of meaning that neither of them could acknowledge directly. In those few words, Owen was telling her that he accepted her marriage, respected it, wanted her to find happiness within it. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a great deal coming from you." Owen straightened, preparing to leave. "I should check the night watch." "Mr. O'Malley," Lucinda said impulsively. "Owen, I never properly thanked you for your help when I first arrived, for your kindness when I was in such distress." A small smile curved his mouth. "No thanks needed, but you're welcome all the same. Your mother taught you well," she continued. "About healing, I mean, and kindness." "She'd have liked you," Owen said, and something in his tone made Lucinda's heart ache for what might have been in another life, another world where she had met Owen O'Malley before committing herself to James Peterson. "Good night, Mrs. Peterson," Owen said formally, settling his hat on his head. "Good night, Mr. O'Malley," she responded, equally formal as they returned to their proper roles. The roundup concluded successfully, and the ranch settled into its winter routine. December brought colder weather and preparations for Christmas, which James informed Lucinda was traditionally celebrated with a party for the ranch hands and neighboring families. "Elizabeth established the tradition," he explained as they discussed arrangements. "It's good for community relations, and the men appreciate the recognition of their year's work." Lucinda threw herself into planning the celebration, working with Mrs. Chavez to prepare traditional foods and decorating the main house with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. She even convinced James to allow a tree in the parlor, decorated with paper ornaments she made herself and small gifts for each ranch employee. On Christmas Eve, the house filled with people ranch hands in their Sunday best, neighbors from miles around, and townspeople from Marysville, who had made the journey despite the cold. James moved among the guests with uncharacteristic ease, proudly introducing Lucinda as the creative force behind the evening's festivities. Owen arrived with the other hands, his tall figure standing out in the crowded parlor. He had traded his work clothes for a clean shirt and vest, his dark hair neatly combed. When he approached to greet them, Lucinda noticed James clap him on the shoulder with genuine warmth. "O'Malley," James said. "Just the man I wanted to see. That stallion you've been training, how's he coming along?" As the men discussed horses, Lucinda observed the easy rapport between them, the mutual respect of two competent men who had worked together for years and faced dangers side by side. There was no hint of tension, no shadow of the unspoken feelings that Lucinda sometimes caught in Owen's eyes when he looked at her. The evening progressed with food and music, several of the hands producing fiddles and harmonicas for impromptu dancing. To Lucinda's surprise, James asked her to dance, leading her through a somewhat stiff but sincere waltz that earned applause from the onlookers. "You continue to surprise me," Lucinda teased as they moved around the cleared space in the parlor. "I didn't know you danced." "Poorly," James admitted with a rare self-deprecating smile. "But it seems appropriate to dance with my wife at Christmas." Later, as Lucinda was serving punch to some of the older guests, she found Owen beside her, helping to fill cups. "Successful evening," he commented. "Best Christmas party the ranch has seen." "Thank you," Lucinda said, "though I understand Elizabeth started the tradition." Owen nodded. "She did. Very proper affairs. Good food, polite conversation." He glanced around at the lively gathering where several hands were now singing boisterously by the tree. "This is different. Warmer." Before Lucinda could respond, a young ranch hand appeared at her elbow, clearly having consumed some spiked punch. "Mrs. Peterson." "You're standing under the mistletoe." Lucinda looked up to see a sprig of mistletoe hanging from the doorway above her and Owen. Heat rushed to her face as several nearby guests turned to look, including James, who was conversing with the banker from Marysville a few feet away. For a moment, no one moved. Then James said calmly, "Tradition is tradition, O'Malley. Don't keep my wife waiting." There was no suspicion in his voice, no tension, just the good-humored indulgence of a host at a Christmas party. He trusted them both, Lucinda realized. The knowledge made what happened next both easier and more difficult. Owen bent and placed the lightest of kisses on Lucinda's cheek, proper and respectful, lasting only a second. But in that brief contact, in the faint tremor she felt in his hand at her elbow, Lucinda understood the depth of what he concealed behind his careful restraint. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Peterson," Owen said, his voice steady despite the emotion she sensed beneath it. "Merry Christmas, Mr. O'Malley," she replied, equally composed. The moment passed, the party continued, and if anyone noticed anything unusual in the brief exchange, they gave no sign of it. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house was quiet, James presented Lucinda with a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold locket with their initials engraved on the cover. "It's beautiful," she said, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gift. "You've brought something to this house that was missing," James said, his gray eyes serious. "Not just efficiency or social graces, but a certain warmth. I'm grateful for it." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I believe I'm coming to love you, Lucinda, in my own way." It was the first time he had spoken of love, and Lucinda felt tears spring to her eyes. "James, he shook his head slightly. "You needn't say anything. I know ours was an arrangement, not a love match, but perhaps in time." "I do care for you," Lucinda said truthfully. "Very much. You're a good man, an honorable husband." James smiled, seemingly satisfied with her response. He didn't press for more, didn't ask for words she wasn't ready to give. His respect for her honesty was one of the qualities she had come to value most about him. Winter passed into spring, marking a year since Lucinda's arrival in Marysville. The anniversary of their wedding approached, and James suggested a trip to San Francisco to celebrate. "You've never seen the city," he pointed out, "and I have business there that could be combined with pleasure. We could stay a week, attend the theater, perhaps buy some new furnishings for the house." Lucinda was delighted by the prospect. Though she had grown accustomed to ranch life and found satisfaction in her role as Mrs. Peterson, she occasionally missed the cultural amenities of a larger city. As they prepared for their journey, James called Owen to the house for final instructions about ranch operations during their absence. "I'm entrusting everything to your care, O'Malley," James said, reviewing a list of ongoing projects. "As usual." "Yes, sir," Owen replied. "Don't worry about things here. Enjoy your anniversary trip." His eyes met Lucinda's briefly, and she saw sincere good wishes there, despite the shadow of something deeper. In the year since her arrival, Owen had maintained a careful, respectful distance, never overstepping the boundaries of propriety, never giving James any reason to question his loyalty. The trip to San Francisco was everything Lucinda had hoped for: elegant hotels, fine dining, an evening at the theater, and afternoons shopping for household items and personal luxuries that weren't available in Marysville. James was an attentive escort, clearly enjoying her pleasure in the experiences. On their last evening in the city, over dinner at an expensive restaurant overlooking the bay, James surprised her with another gift, a pair of sapphire earrings that matched her eyes. "They're exquisite," Lucinda exclaimed, genuinely moved by his thoughtfulness. "I wanted to mark our anniversary with something special," James said, watching her with evident satisfaction as she put them on. "This first year has exceeded my expectations, Lucinda." You've been everything I hoped for in a wife and more." "Thank you," she said softly. "I've found contentment in our marriage, James. Security, respect, companionship, these are valuable things." James studied her face for a moment, but not everything a young woman might dream of. The perceptiveness of his question startled her. I didn't mean to suggest any dissatisfaction. I know." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Lucinda, I'm not a romantic man. I've never pretended to be, but I see more than you might think." His gray eyes held hers steadily. "I see how O'Malley looks at you sometimes when he thinks no one is watching." Lucinda's heart nearly stopped. "James, I assure you," he raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I know you've been faithful, both in body and in your commitment to our marriage. And O'Malley is an honorable man. He would never act on whatever he feels." Lucinda sat frozen, unsure how to respond to this unexpected directness. "I brought you to San Francisco for our anniversary," James continued, "but also to discuss something important. I'm considering expansion, buying the Thornton property that borders our north section. It would nearly double our acreage and require additional management." The abrupt change of subject confused Lucinda. "That sounds like a significant opportunity." "It is. But it would mean promoting O'Malley to full manager of the original ranch, while I focus on developing the new property." James watched her face carefully. "That would mean more interaction between you and O'Malley, as he would report directly to me, but need to coordinate with you on household matters affecting the ranch operations." Understanding dawned. James was asking, in his indirect way, if this arrangement would create difficulties, if her feelings for Owen, whatever they might be, would compromise her ability to maintain appropriate boundaries. "I believe Mr. O'Malley would perform admirably in such a role," Lucinda said carefully. "And I would have no concerns about working with him on ranch matters. Our interactions have always been completely proper." James nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I thought as much, but I wanted to be certain." "James," Lucinda said, needing to address the underlying issue, "I made vows to you. I take them seriously." "I know you do." He squeezed her hand. "That's one of the many things I admire about you, Lucinda, your integrity." The conversation moved on to other topics, but Lucinda found herself reflecting on James's perceptiveness. He had seen what she had tried so hard to conceal, the unspoken attraction between her and Owen. Yet instead of jealousy or suspicion, he had responded with pragmatic acceptance of human nature and trust in her commitment to their marriage. It was, perhaps, not the passionate love she had secretly dreamed of as a young girl, but it was a deep respect and growing affection that had its own value. When they returned to the ranch, James wasted no time implementing his expansion plans. The purchase of the Thornton property was finalized, and Owen was officially promoted to manager of the original Peterson ranch, with increased responsibilities and compensation. Summer brought the expected challenges of heat and fire danger, but also an unexpected development. Lucinda discovered she was expecting a child. The news delighted James, who had begun to think, at 43, that he might never have an heir for the ranch he had built. As her pregnancy progressed, Lucinda found herself thinking often of her mother in Boston, wishing for her guidance during this new chapter of her life. When she mentioned this to James, he surprised her with his response. "Invite her to come," he suggested. "She could stay through the winter, help you with the baby's arrival. The stage runs regularly now, and the railroad will reach Sacramento by year's end, making the journey less arduous than the one you endured." Lucinda was deeply touched by his consideration. "Are you certain?" "It would mean another person in the household for months." "Your mother is welcome here," James said firmly. "This is your home, Lucinda. Your family is now my family." The invitation was sent, and Mrs. Keller accepted enthusiastically, promising to arrive by early November, well before the baby's expected Christmas arrival. As autumn approached, Lucinda's condition became more visible, prompting protective instincts from everyone at the ranch. James insisted she rest more and avoid strenuous activities. Mrs. Chavez prepared special foods believed to strengthen mother and child. And Owen, in his new managerial role, made subtle adjustments to ranch operations to minimize disturbances near the house during her afternoon rest periods. One cool September afternoon, Lucinda was sitting on the front porch, enjoying the play of light on the distant hills when Owen rode up to the house. He dismounted, removing his hat as he approached the porch. "Mrs. Peterson," he greeted her formally, "I hope I'm not disturbing your rest." "Not at all, Mr. O'Malley." Lucinda gestured to the chair beside her. "Please join me for a moment." Owen hesitated, then sat, placing his hat on his knee. "I came to inform you that we'll be moving the cattle from the south pasture tomorrow. There might be some noise, but we'll keep them as far from the house as possible." "Thank you for your consideration," Lucinda said, smiling. "But you needn't rearrange ranch operations for my comfort. I'm pregnant, not invalid." A small answering smile tugged at Owen's mouth. "Just following the boss's orders, madam. He's very particular about your well-being these days." "Yes, he's been wonderfully attentive." Lucinda rested her hand on her rounded belly. "This child means a great deal to him." "To everyone," Owen said quietly. "The first Peterson heir." "It's significant." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. It struck Lucinda that this was the first time in many months that they had been alone together, without the pressure of ranch business or others present. "James told me about your promotion," she said. "Congratulations, it's well-deserved." "Thank you." Owen looked down at his hat, turning it slowly in his hands. "It's a vote of confidence I appreciate. You've been loyal to this ranch, to the Peterson name," Lucinda said softly. "James values that above all else." Owen looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "Loyalty is important to me too." The simple statement carried layers of meaning that both understood. His loyalty extended beyond the ranch, beyond his employer, to honoring the bonds of marriage, to respecting the life Lucinda had built with James, to placing duty above personal feelings. "I know," Lucinda said, "and we value that greatly." The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, causing Lucinda to gasp slightly and press her hand more firmly against her belly. "Are you all right?" Owen asked, concern evident in his voice. "Yes, perfectly fine," Lucinda laughed. "Just an active little one." Without thinking, she reached for his hand. "Here, feel." It was an impulsive gesture, the kind she might make with James or Mrs. Chavez, innocent in its intent, sharing a mother's wonder at the life growing within her. But as Owen's large, calloused hand rested gently against the swell of her belly, the moment became charged with unspoken emotions. The baby kicked again, and Owen's eyes widened in wonder. "Strong," he said softly. "Like his father, or her mother," Lucinda countered with a smile. Owen withdrew his hand carefully, but his eyes remained on hers, filled with a complex mixture of emotions: wonder at the miracle of new life, happiness for her, and beneath it all, the ache of what would never be. "You'll make a wonderful mother," he said quietly. Before Lucinda could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats announced James's return from the north property. Owen stood quickly, restoring the proper distance between them. "I should get back to work," he said, settling his hat on his head. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Peterson." "Good afternoon, Mr. O'Malley," Lucinda responded, her composure perfect as James rode into the yard. That evening, as Lucinda prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the brief interaction with Owen. There had been nothing improper in it, nothing that would give James cause for concern if he had witnessed it. Yet she felt a lingering uneasiness, a sense that she had momentarily allowed the barriers of propriety to slip in a way that might lead to dangerous territory. James entered their bedroom, interrupting her thoughts. "O'Malley tells me the South herd is ready to move tomorrow," he said, removing his watch and setting it on the bedside table. "He's routing them away from the house so you won't be disturbed." "That's very considerate," Lucinda said, brushing her hair before the mirror. "Though not necessary. I'm not so delicate." James came to stand behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror's reflection. "Humor us," he said with a small smile. "This child is precious to me, as are you." His simple words touched her deeply. This was not the passionate declaration of a romantic hero from a novel, but it was sincere and, in its way, profound. James Peterson was not demonstrative by nature, but his steady devotion, his constant consideration, his growing affection, these were real and valuable. Lucinda turned to face him, reaching for his hand. "James," she said softly, "I want you to know that I'm happy, truly happy as your wife." Something in his expression lightened, as though a lingering uncertainty had been resolved. He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm glad," he said simply. "That's all I've wanted, to provide a good life for you, a secure future for our child." He placed his other hand on her belly, and the baby kicked as if in response. James smiled, a genuine expression of joy that transformed his usually serious face. In that moment, Lucinda felt a surge of deep affection for this man who had given her so much, not just material security, but respect, kindness, and in his own way, love. It wasn't the overwhelming passion she had once dreamed of, but it was real and lasting. And if, occasionally, her thoughts still strayed to Owen O'Malley's blue eyes and gentle hands, she accepted that as a private weakness she would continue to overcome. Her commitment was to James and their child, to the family they were building, to the vows she had made and intended to honor. November brought Mrs. Keller's arrival, a joyous reunion between mother and daughter. To Lucinda's relief, her mother and James got along well, with Mrs. Keller expressing approval of her son-in-law's evident prosperity and consideration toward Lucinda. The weeks passed peacefully as the ranch prepared for winter and Lucinda prepared for motherhood. James expanded the nursery, ordering furniture from San Francisco and hiring extra help to assist Mrs. Chavez with household duties. Owen ensured that ranch operations ran smoothly, handling day-to-day management so James could focus on the new property development and preparing for his heir. December arrived with a dusting of snow on the distant mountains and Christmas preparations underway. Lucinda, now in her final weeks of pregnancy, supervised the decorations from a comfortable chair while her mother and Mrs. Chavez handled the more physical tasks. The annual Christmas party was scheduled for December 23rd, slightly earlier than usual to accommodate Lucinda's condition. Though her due date was still a week away, no one wanted to risk a Christmas Eve celebration being interrupted by the arrival of the Peterson heir. On the morning of December 22nd, Lucinda woke to a dull backache and an odd sensation of pressure. By midday, she recognized the regular pattern of contractions beginning. Her mother, experienced from 4 childbirths of her own, confirmed that labor had begun. James was at the North property, overseeing construction of new corrals. Mrs. Keller dispatched a ranch hand to fetch him and another to ride for the doctor in Marysville. Then she and Mrs. Chavez began preparing the birthing room with practiced efficiency. By late afternoon, Lucinda's labor had intensified. The doctor had arrived, but there was still no sign of James. As another powerful contraction gripped her, Lucinda heard raised voices in the hallway. "What do you mean, the bridge is out?" That was her mother's voice, sharp with concern. "The storm last night washed it away, madam." Owen's deep voice, unusually tense. "Mr. Peterson can't get across the river. He tried to ford it on horseback, but the current's too strong. He sent me to tell Mrs. Peterson he's doing everything possible to reach her." The doctor joined the conversation. "How long to repair the bridge?" "Days," Owen replied grimly. "And there's no safe crossing point for miles." Lucinda called out between contractions, "Mother, what's happening?" Mrs. Keller returned to the bedside, attempting to hide her concern. "Nothing to worry about, dear. James is delayed by a problem with the bridge, but he'll be here as soon as possible." "The baby won't wait," Lucinda gasped as another contraction began. "No, it certainly won't," the doctor agreed, checking her progress. "This child is coming soon, bridge or no bridge." The labor continued through the evening, growing more intense as darkness fell. Outside, a winter storm began, with wind rattling the windows and rain turning to sleet. The doctor remained calm but increasingly concerned as the hours passed, and the baby's position proved troublesome. Near midnight, after a particularly difficult contraction, Lucinda heard the doctor speaking quietly to her mother at the foot of the bed. "The baby has turned," he murmured. "It's presenting shoulder first now. I'll need to try to turn it, but it's a difficult procedure, especially for a first birth." "Is there danger?" Mrs. Keller asked bluntly. "To both mother and child, yes," the doctor admitted. "I've done this successfully before, but I'll need strong hands to help hold her steady. It will be painful." "I'll assist," Mrs. Keller said firmly. "We need someone stronger," the doctor countered. "Is the foreman still here?" Lucinda, overhearing this exchange through a haze of pain, called out, "Owen! Is Owen still in the house?" Mrs. Keller came to her side. "Yes, dear. Mr. O'Malley has been waiting downstairs in case we needed anything." "I need him now," Lucinda said decisively, overriding propriety in the face of necessity. "If the doctor needs strength, Owen can help." Minutes later, Owen entered the birthing room, his face grave with concern but determined. He removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and followed the doctor's instructions precisely, providing the strong, steady support needed as the physician worked to turn the baby to a safer position. Throughout the procedure, Owen maintained a professional demeanor, his eyes meeting Lucinda's only briefly to offer encouragement. "You're doing fine," he said softly. "Strong as ever, just hold on." The pain was excruciating, but Lucinda focused on the doctor's instructions, on her mother's prayers, on Owen's steady presence. After what seemed an eternity, the doctor announced success. The baby had turned to the proper position. From that point, events moved quickly. With 3 more powerful pushes, Lucinda delivered a healthy son, his lusty cries filling the room as the clock struck 2, officially December 23rd. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the red-faced, squalling infant on Lucinda's chest. "A fine heir for the Peterson ranch." Exhausted but exhilarated, Lucinda gazed down at her son, marveling at his tiny features, his shock of dark hair, his perfect miniature fingers. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Her mother wept happy tears. The doctor busied himself with final examinations, and Owen stood back, his expression a complex mixture of joy, wonder, and something deeper as he watched Lucinda with her newborn son. "Thank you," Lucinda said, looking up to meet his eyes. "For your help. For being here." Owen nodded once, unable to speak. Then he turned to the doctor. "I'll ride for Mr. Peterson at first light, find a way to get him across that river." True to his word, Owen departed at dawn, leading a team of men determined to create a temporary crossing. By mid-afternoon, They had succeeded in felling trees to create a makeshift bridge strong enough for a man on horseback to cross carefully. James arrived at the ranch house as dusk was falling, rushing to the bedroom where Lucinda rested with their son in her arms. His usually composed face was transformed by emotion as he gazed at his child for the first time. "A son," he said, his voice thick. "Our son." "James Thomas Peterson," Lucinda said, having chosen the name months earlier James for his father, Thomas for her own father who had passed away years before. James sat carefully on the edge of the bed, tentatively touching the baby's cheek with one finger. "He's perfect," he whispered. Then he looked at Lucinda, his gray eyes shining with tears. "As are you. I've never been so frightened as when I couldn't reach you, couldn't help you." "We managed," Lucinda assured him. "Mother was here and the doctor and O'Malley told me," James interrupted. "How he assisted the doctor, how brave you were. I'm grateful he was here when I couldn't be." The Christmas party the next day became a dual celebration of the holiday and of young James Thomas's birth. The house was filled with well-wishers, and Lucinda, resting in a comfortable chair in the parlor with her son in her arms, received their congratulations with tired happiness. Owen arrived with the other hands, hanging back until most had offered their good wishes. When he finally approached, his expression was carefully neutral, though his eyes softened as they rested briefly on the sleeping infant. "Congratulations, Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Peterson." He nodded to them both. "A fine son." "We owe you a debt, O'Malley," James said earnestly, "for your help during the birth and for getting me across that river afterward." "Just doing my job, sir," Owen replied modestly. "Above and beyond," James insisted. He glanced at Lucinda, then back at Owen. "I've been considering something for some time. This seems like the right moment to mention it. The Thornton property is developing well, but I find myself stretched thin trying to oversee both ranches. I've decided to offer you a partnership in the original Peterson ranch, a 25% stake, with the title of managing partner." Owen's surprise was evident. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," James encouraged. "You've earned it through years of loyal service, and recent events have only confirmed what I already knew, that I can trust you implicitly with everything I value." His gaze moved meaningfully from Lucinda to the baby and back to Owen. The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on either Lucinda or Owen. James was acknowledging the unspoken connection between them, while simultaneously transforming it, channeling Owen's feelings into a legitimate partnership that would benefit everyone, including the child now sleeping peacefully in Lucinda's arms. "I accept," Owen said finally. "With gratitude. I'll continue to earn your trust. I know you will." James extended his hand, and Owen shook it firmly, sealing the agreement between them. The years that followed brought prosperity to both the Peterson ranches and happiness to the growing family. James Thomas was joined by a sister, Elizabeth Margaret, 2 years later, and another brother, William Owen, 2 years after that. The partnership between James and Owen proved highly successful, with Owen's practical ranching skills complementing James's business acumen. As the children grew, they developed strong bonds with both men, James the loving but sometimes stern father, Owen the patient teacher who showed them how to ride, rope, and understand the rhythms of ranch life. Lucinda found fulfillment in motherhood, in managing the expanding household, and in the community work she gradually took on in Marysville. Her relationship with James deepened into a strong, affectionate partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. If it lacked the passionate romance of storybooks, it offered instead a steady, enduring bond that strengthened with each passing year. And Owen. He remained a constant presence, the trusted family friend and business partner who joined them for Sunday dinners, taught the Peterson children to ride their first horses, and stood loyally by James through good seasons and bad. He never married, devoting himself instead to the ranch and to his role as honorary uncle to the Peterson children. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the family gathered on the porch after dinner, Lucinda would catch Owen watching her with a certain expression in his blue eyes, not longing exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement of what might have been in another life, another world. In those moments, she would feel an answering echo in her own heart, a brief wondering about paths not taken, but these were passing thoughts, gentle ghosts that she neither indulged nor denied. Her life with James was good and right, filled with purpose and contentment. The choices they had all made, she, James, and Owen had created something valuable and lasting. A successful enterprise, a thriving family, a legacy that would endure. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, James presented Lucinda with a journal bound in soft leather. Inside, on the first page, he had written, "For my wife, who arrived as a stranger and became the heart of our home, with deepest gratitude and affection, J.P." That night, as James slept beside her, Lucinda wrote her first entry by lamplight, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She wrote of her arrival in Marysville, of the mortifying discovery of lice in her hair, of the kindness of a blue-eyed cowboy who had helped her when she was most vulnerable. She wrote of choices made and honors kept, of a marriage that had grown from arrangement to partnership, to genuine love of a kind she hadn't initially recognized, steady, reliable, deep as the roots of the oak trees that sheltered their home. And as she closed the journal, Lucinda realized that what had seemed at first like settling for less had actually been finding something different but equally valuable. The romantic notions of her youth had given way to a more mature understanding of love's many forms. She had found her place, her purpose, her family. And in the end, wasn't that the truest form of happily ever after?